The following program features language some listeners may find offensive. Listener discretion is advised.
But yeah, legacy, actually, thinking about a legacy is definitely with the teaching and, he wasn't even like teaching a lot of the time. He was just turning up with turntables and just like, just inspiring people, I guess. And then, those people that we inspired us as well, so it's just like, a lot of the young people at the time that we were doing workshops with, and I think I mentioned before, like ended up being people that we make music with and hang out with and stuff like that. And so maybe the legacy is like that in like the, that sort of slightly younger generation.
You are listening to Hip Hop Cymru Wales, a podcast exploring the trails and untold tales of Welsh hip hop. My name is Lloyd Bailey and I'm a podcaster, best known for the Fly Fidelity podcast, and I'm talking to key players about the notable and nuanced evolution of Welsh hip hop history.
Bow for my man who can rock a jam. Dedicate this to all Welsh DJs. Take it back to brass knucks and blast those. Must be a bar for every nebulous slide. Yellow brick days of Welsh heritage. Don't mess with the wicked. Smash down the walls, the revolution's coming at you. We rolled into town with mics in our holster. Captain of our ship, with a master of our fate. With a greed to succeed where most men fail. Rock stars, bars, hard on Belushi flesh. As soon as I hit the stage, my presence is felt. You wanna rock up on my mic, I'll bang ya. Vanilla story ever told for me. From the land of the mystical dragon hearts. Gritty, my life story.
Welcome to the program. This episode, an intimate conversation with trailblazing turntablist Monkey, now known as Elmono, DJ, producer, record maker, and former member of the legendary Optimas Prime. We dive into his incredible story and reflect on the enduring legacy of the late great Stagger. Enjoy the conversation.
Land bystand, so you're hardly gonna hit me right some shit about stand. I spit what you today will still be tomorrow.
Daedelus was probably like the first hip hop album that I listened to when I was young. So
what year was that?
Like when it first came out, I think it was like 93. So back then, I was like, there were like a few like hip hop records that, sort of passed me by, that I kind of caught on to. And I listened to a lot, like that record I really listened to a lot. But then, I was into like playing the guitar and stuff. So I was into like, like Jimi Hendrix and like psychedelic kind of music, and like even like punk stuff and just loads of kind of weird stuff. So I was into all kinds of different music, and hip hop came a little bit later, I suppose. Like really getting into hip hop came a little bit later.
Right.
So my memories, just like DJing and like certain albums, and I was just like really kind of blown away by like how kind of progressive they were, at the time. Liquid Swords, stuff like that. Just hearing them and being like, whoa, this is like real sort of like out there kind of music. I'm trying to think of it, like DJ Shadow, introducing, like I'm probably going all over the place with like, chronologically, but it was just things like that. There was like a few like albums, there were like compilations. Like I remember having this album, which was, it was, oh God, what was it called? It was from like a club it was like almost like, what was the club in LA which Daedelus plays at?
Low End Theory.
Yeah, it was almost like a precursor to Louen theory,
Right.
and it had like an executioner's track on there, like proper like turntablism. You know, it was like a
Dope.
recording, but it was like straight up, just like them. You know, like no post production. Well, it's probably like, you know, recorded in a studio, but there was no sort of like beats. Everything was like scratched, and you know, that was really sort of like you know, just like interesting sonically.
Yeah.
And it had like Cut Chemist and Newmark track, which was all, you know, it was just really sort of, it had like you know, a few rap tunes, but like it was mostly kind of like instrumental or like scratch stuff. So yeah, I listened to that a lot. You know, like DJ Food kind of stuff, and like DJ Crush. You know, listening to a lot of that kind of stuff, like Dr. Octagon. You know, it really rinsed that album a lot. And yeah, so it was just like a lot of like discovering music. You know, it was like that time I was, you know, felt like I was pretty young, and you know, I'd sit down and listen to an album, and I'd really like, you know, be in that album. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't like I just kind of like listening passively. I was just like, it was kind of like, you know, all consuming kind of, you know, really kind of like discovering new music. So it was quite exciting from that point of view. And also, you know, I hadn't got into production or anything like that at that time. So I had no idea how this sort of stuff was being made. So so I wasn't coming at it with that kind of critical ear either, you know.
So you're wrapped up in the beginning in a lot of subversive stuff. A lot of this music you're listening to is subverting hip hop as we know it. What was it about rap that caught your ear? And how does that eventually progress to collecting records and DJing? Was it all at once or sort of a slow process for you?
Yeah, well, the rap thing. So it's kind of weird because like I never, even with like any music, and this has kind of always been the way for me, I never really catch lyrics until much later. So when I listen to music, I'm just really listening to the music, like instrumentally and maybe like melodically. You know, I'd always like really catch like a rapper's flow, you know, first of all. And I wouldn't really catch lyrics until much later, you know. So it's like lyrics have always been kind of like, you know, like very much kind of like secondary to me.
Right?
Yeah, but funnily enough, like with MF Doom, I'd always be on the lyrics straight away. So him in particular, I would just really sort of like, it was always the lyrics. You know, I'd be in the story kind of thing. But there's not really many people that do that for me so much. Maybe these days, Freddie Gibbs, you know, nice. I really kind of catch his lyrics quite a lot. But yeah, it's always been the way with me. Like, you know, like I'm one of those people that never knows the real lyrics to a song. You know, it'll always be like something like, you know, kind of sounds like it is, but that's not the real lyrics. So so that's what I'm like when listening to music. It's always the music, and then yeah, it's just collecting records, and like I got a really big record collection now, but a lot of music there is like stuff that I just want to get rid of. So before I moved to Lisbon, I was like on Discogs a lot, like selling loads of my records. Because like when I started buying records, you know, I'd just like go to Catapult and like even HMV, because they always had like a good hip hop section. And, you know, a lot of the time I'd just buy whatever's there. And, you know, you go back through your record collection then and just realize like, you know, a lot of the stuff you've got is stuff that is like, you know, stuff that you'd want to kind of, you never really sit down and listen to it. So I spent a lot of time recently, just kind of like streamlining my record collection, so I can just go straight in there and you know, pull out something I want to listen to.
Who would have been some of those touchstone influences that actually got you to want to DJ and participate in hip hop?
definitely Stagger was like, my main kind of, like, I guess like mentor, and he's like the person I was just watching him scratching, and I was like, yeah, I want to do that kind of thing. And then, he was always really proactive, and, just got me involved kind of thing right from the start. He was like, he knew I had turntables, so he was just straight away like, oh, bring your turntables round, and, we'll like set him up and, start doing that. So he's definitely Stagger. And also, just people like, mates that like were introducing me to music. When we got more into like doing gigs and stuff, we met Jaffa and all those guys, like, cause, they were really like, that's what it's like when I guess it's the same with like MCs, like you meet a new MC, or, meet a new, like, I don't know, just somebody who kind of inspires you. So they got a fresh angle on things, they're not coming from where you're coming from, and they've got like, different skills, and you want to learn those skills, so it's always inspiring. I guess I was watching loads of DMC stuff, checking out like the Scratch Pickles, watching Turntable TV, just geeks, like scratch geeks really. So anything scratch related, I was just all over that.
So Stagger sort of holds your hand in the beginning and plays a big role within your introduction to scratching. Can you speak to any sort of eureka moments that changed the way you scratched and thought about scratching?
I don't know. It's such a long time ago, and but we just used to like practice like religiously back then. Just be like, I'd just spend most of my day just messing around, put a beat on that I could just play like for probably like over an hour and just be scratching to it. But yeah, it's constantly eureka moments really. I think we were like, there was like, we had this thing that was kind of like, you'd kind of like get stuck in a rut a little bit, just doing the same thing over and over again, and just felt like, oh, if that's like happens, then it means that, there's like, some kind of breakthroughs kind of imminent, and that kind of felt like the way, like it's kind of like get a new thing, get a new kind of like work out a new trick, like you said, it's like skateboarding, but I always likened it to skateboarding but without the danger, so that was kind of good. I didn't have to risk like, breaking my ankle or something like that, but it's the same, you're learning new tricks, and so you'd like the crab, it was like always like this elusive like technique, it's like, they use all their fingers, and it's like they do this thing, and it's kind of like, use all four fingers to like transform. Is like, it seemed like, like just miles away from being able to achieve it, and then all of a sudden you can do it, and then that comes part of your repertoire, and then there was like flares, like there's a scratch technique called a flare, and we just heard of it, but none of us really understood what it was, and I think I was actually the first one to do a flare out of all of us lot. So and it just happened accidentally, and it was like, oh right, that must be a flare, and so there's always these like little milestones, and I guess they were like the little kind of techniques or tricks, and as soon as you've got it, it's it's like it's just opens up a whole world of new kind of techniques and ways to scratch,
A lot of that is trial and error, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. You just like messing around, like you get it with all kind of like art forms, happy accidents,
right?
And that's what you're always kind of looking for, those like little things that you stumble across, and it's almost like it got plucked out the ether, it's like you didn't even do it, it was like the universe kind of did it, and you just kind of like channeled it or something.
What was it you learned being a student of Stagger?
I I don't know. I don't know if I was like a student. It was just like he was
And I
just
say
kind of like,
that with the most respect, of course. In terms of scratching, it was new to you back then, and I know you were watching Stagger in awe and admiration of what it was he was doing in the beginning, weren't you?
yeah, totally. I don't know. Yeah, like I guess like he was my kind of mentor in that way when we were first kind of starting, because he had been doing it for a long time. So yeah, I guess like all scratching really, it never really like occurred to me that you could do all these things on the turntables and beat juggling and stuff like that. So so at the start it was just everything really, transforming, like mixing acapellas over, other beats, like sort of that whole remixing thing.
Right.
I mean, he had like Cubase on an Atari ST back then, so he was kind of like making beats, and just that sound, like like the sound that he was kind of into. Yeah, I guess I just looked up to him, and like influence wise, anything that he was digging, I would kind of dig as well, because I respected his kind of like his like taste and ear and stuff, and it was like he knew what was good kind of thing. So yeah, there was a lot of that, I guess.
You're absorbing a lot of that inspiration. What are you using
exactly,
at that time?
Absorbing a lot. That was exactly what was happening, because he was like older than me as well. So he had all, had all this music and stuff. So literally, I would just be absorbing everything, and it was just a case of that,
What was the age difference back then?
I think he's like 5 years older than me. But also there was Mike, his brother, and we were in the band together. And Mike was, into similar music but different music as well. So I was absorbing a lot from him. He was like well into like Pink Floyd and like Can and bands like that, and in Black Sabbath. I never really, Black Sabbath were like wicked, like really like psychedelic. A lot of their music, they were really kind of like it was really quite trippy stuff, which I didn't realize, and that was what I was into. Anything with a kind of like spacey, trippy kind of edge. I just kind of lap that sort of stuff up. And so Mike as well, he was like a big influence, and that was the thing. I would just, it was mad actually, because Rob and Mike, they lived at their parents' house. We were all pretty young, and Mike and Rob's parents are just like the nicest people in the world, and they were so like open to like me and all their mates. We'd all just hang out at the house all the time. It's one of those houses that we just let ourselves in, and Mike's mum would just like make us a cup of tea, and it was just really like just always felt really welcome and comfortable there. So it just like hang out at the house like all the time really, and just be listening to music, and it was just a really nice atmosphere.
Beautiful. What was it that you were using to turn this practice into potential back then?
In what way? Like just turntables really. I started off, I just had some really shit Sound Lab, and I was trying to scratch on them. So, and they're like a really awful mixer, which like when the crossfader just gets stuck and doesn't move. So I just had to use the transformer switches, and then I started studying in the Welsh College of Music and Drama. I started doing music tech there, and just used my student loan to get some techniques.
Can you remember your first time experimenting collectively, as far as setting up your turntables in a row and putting together your first routine?
A little bit. I can't quite remember. It's kind of like a mixture of like, a few times, and there's just like, I think it's all kind of like got kind of like blended into one kind of memory. But I do remember actually the first time we tried to do a routine, we did it just on one set of turntables. So it was like Rob was on the right deck and I was on the left deck, and we were both using the same mixer. So we started off doing a routine like that.
So that then becomes this starting place in terms of you leaning into this identity and developing your craft together. Did you guys already have a crew name at that time?
Well, yeah, I think I mentioned we were called Spock. Rob and Mike I think they just made a tape once with Rob on the decks, and I can't really remember what Mike was doing, maybe on a keyboard. We had a few analog keyboards, which I'm really gutted that they went missing, because they were I would love to have those right now. But yeah, Mike had this Korg mono synth, so I think he was probably playing that, through some effects or something like that. And Rob was on, I don't know what Rob was doing. I think just putting on, beats, like DJ Tool records. So the beats are real stripped back and just scratching over the top. And they just did that one day, made a tape, and they called it The Search for Spock. The Star Trek film. And then, went round that night or something, he played it to me. And then the next time they did it, I got involved, and yeah, we were just kind of messing around. Yeah, it was all kind of had that kind of trippy kind of edge to it, which we were, just well into back then. Because yeah, we were listening to not only rave stuff, but sort of electronica and all that kind of stuff as well. So yeah, so there's a real mix of things.
So it was very much a genre cocktail for yourselves back then.
Yeah, and that's the way it's always been with us,
Σαν τη βροχή. Σαν τη βροχή. Στα πιο ψηλά βουνά.
So myself, Rob, and Paul, PR1, all moved into a house in Cyfarthfa Street, and then so we just set up all our decks together, in one of the bedrooms, and we would just it was just like a scratch house. We would just all get up first thing in the morning and just get in and start jamming.
Nice.
I was studying. We kind of had loosely employed kind of thing, just working in kitchens and stuff like that. So we had a lot of time to kill.
This is PR1 Optimas Prime. In 97, 98, I was in Cardiff and started DJing. Started getting into scratching, playing out a couple of nights a week. And I ended up at an after party after a gig by a band called Pink Pussy, who were a glam rock band from Cardiff, and they were playing with another group called Dark Bazaar, who were this kind of psychedelic dub sort of outfit. And I ended up at this party after one of their gigs, and got chatting to Mike from Dark Bazaar, who was Rob Stagg's brother. Got chatting about scratching, DJing, and he sort of pointed out that his brother and his mate Monkey were into scratching and turntablism, and there really wasn't anyone sort of up to that sort of stuff in those days in Cardiff, or it didn't really feel like there was. So yeah, we ended up getting together and sort of got on really well. Started scratching together quite quickly and sort of having a few jam sessions, and ended up moving in together. Sort of infamous house on Cyfarthfa Street. We were there for a little while, trying to get as many gigs as we could, really. So we sort of scratching all the time, taking any opportunity opportunities to play out whenever we could. I think the first gig that we had together as sort of Optimas Prime, as it were, was a night put on by a guy called Lincoln, who was mates with Monkey. Monkey was quite involved with a few of the people from college in Cardiff who had studied music. So he knew this guy Lincoln, who is now, or was then, High Contrast. So he put on this jungle night, and he let us have the first couple of hours, and we just kind of moved from our bedrooms, all our decks and mixers, and piled up in there, and kind of carried on scratching and practicing. And we never really had any worked out routines, but yeah, we sort of had a lot of fun. I think a lot of people quite enjoyed the novelty of seeing 6 or 7 decks all set up and lots of people scratching at the same time. And yeah, that's how we all got together. And Stagger was a bit of a sort of good influence on us because he was a little bit ahead of us with scratching and mixing. His scratching was amazing. And yeah, me and Monkey kind of learned from him and learned from each other. And yeah, it was good years.
I actually got us our first gig because I just got asked to DJ at my mate's thing, who it was actually Lincoln High Contrast, because me and Lincoln went to Glenhavron together and studied media studies, and Lincoln had started putting on like a sort of like, you know, a night downstairs in this Australian bar in town. I can't remember what it was called. You know, it's long gone now. It was, I think it's like a Burger King or something now. But it was like downstairs in there. And do you know, like Gareth? I can't remember his surname, but do you know like the Neuropol dubstep night called Neuropol?
I can't say I do.
So that was like where, like at the dubstep in Cardiff. That was like the first dubstep night in Cardiff. So I'm going way off tangent now. But originally, before it was that, Lincoln and Gareth, I can't remember his surname, his DJ name's Truth, ran Neuropol downstairs in this Australian bar, and they got me to DJ there, and it was like the first time I'd ever DJ'd out, and I played there one week, and then they asked me to do it again the next week, and I just said, you know, oh, why don't we all go down with all our decks and just, you know, like just jam. It was always like a lot of the time it'd just be a jam. We'd never have anything kind of planned, and that was the first gigs. And then like we just started getting booked for things. We didn't really like plan to, you know, or like actively look for gigs. It just kind of like happened, kind of quite sort of
organically.
You know, organically. It just kind of like, you know, it just started happening. We were just like getting booked to play places, and it was always like, you know, just really like rough and ready and like a bit sketchy, well, very sketchy a lot of the time. You know, if I look back on it, I was like, I can't believe we used to do that and get away with it.
When you say sketchy, can you talk about that? What was it you used to do and get away with? Are we talking about like, bum rushing sets? Are we in that era?
We had done that a couple of times. You had
done that prior?
Well, that was actually how we met, because he was playing in the Welsh club, and it was me and Paul, PR1, just went to the gig. It was like Headcase Lads, and so it was like Knobstonut, Slice, and Cuz, and we were just watching it and watching Cuz. You know, we'd never met these guys before, and you know, we were like, oh man, that guy's sick on the decks. And then, you know, it was like open mic bit. So they were like, oh, does anyone want to come up and get on the mic? And we were just like, no, we'll get on the decks though. And they were like really like taken back by that. It's like, yeah, I don't know if is that like the done thing? But yeah, we did it, and yeah, and that was that. And then yeah, I think we just used to like, it was not so much that we would bum rush the decks. But we would just like, if we'd be booked to play somewhere, we'd just take everything apart, you know, like Soundman, you know, it was like Soundman's nightmare. We'd just like, you know, while the other DJs playing, we'd just be like unplugging the decks and plugging our own stuff in, you know, pretty sort of, obnoxious, really. But
we were talking about this the other day, and you had said that half the crowd loved it, the other half didn't.
Yeah, well, I guess I don't know if that was like the actual.
Did it feel that way?
Kind of. It was funny, like we didn't really care, and it was just like, it was like that punk attitude. I think we had a bit of that going on, and it was just funny, like I remember this one time, but this happens a lot. Like, we'd be like, Rob was doing like a beat juggle. And this one time that kind of sticks in my mind, Stagger's like beat juggling. He's doing this wicked beat juggle, and like beat juggling is kind of like stop-starty. So you'd be hearing it, and then there'd be a like little pause. And so he's beat juggling, and it was just wicked. He was just like fucking killing it. And just in the pause, you just heard somebody from the crowd just shout up, "Just play the fucking record." Dick.
Hi, this is DJ Kez. Okay, so Optimas Prime were a three-piece turntable crew on the Cardiff hip hop scene during the mid-90s. And I played a lot of shows, same nights. Very, very talented bunch of guys. Very cool bunch of guys. Always great when you knew they were on the same bill as myself. And yeah, these three guys, they would just rock up. And they would just scratch. It was great. There was no player just playing records. I mean, they were there to do the full-on turntablism experience. I remember Paul was always on the drums. And it was, razor sharp is drum cutting technique. You'd have Monkey cutting up a rhythm section. And then you'd have Rob Stagg, R.I.P. Rob Stagg, a very, very talented turntablist. And Rob would be cutting up the leads, and they'd have these routines. They'd go on for hours, and quite often they said, "Cuz, jump up, man." And I'd get up. One of them would step off for a second. I'd have a little scratch with the guys, and very fond memories of watching and listening to Optimas Prime. Talented bunch, and an integral part of the Welsh music scene in general.
One time, which was really funny at one of these nights, and this was one of the times we like got like a routine down. Like we really like a couple of times we would sort of like work on really sort of tight routines. Eventually, actually, became more like that. We would have like sets that we would play, and they were like real tight kind of turntablist routines and stuff. And so this one time, like one of the first times we did that, and so it was like a band, like we were very much like a band playing our set. And we were on stage, and what it's like with DJing is like, you've got to change the record, really like on point. You've got a certain amount of time to find the next sample, and you've got to drop it at the right time. So everything is like, critical that you're like on it, and doing, changing when you're supposed to. And we were just in the middle of a set, and this guy just gets up on stage and starts like talking to Rob, and just starts like chatting in his ear about like, what we're doing and stuff. And Rob's just like, mate, I'm in the middle of a set, we're trying to like play a set, we're like a band. And the guy's like, oh, right, yeah, well, it'd be really good if, one of you just like played a record right now. I mean, it's really good what you're doing, but if you just played like a really big tune that everyone knows right now, the crowd would just love it. And Rob's just there trying to explain to this guy while he's trying to like, scratch a drum beat or something, which is like challenging in itself, that we're not actually DJs that play music like that. We're actually like a band trying to like, make our own music. And this guy just didn't get it. And it was just funny that he got up on stage to talk to us while we were in the middle of our set. If you imagine like somebody doing that in like to like a rock band or something, people would just be like, what the fuck's this guy doing?
Talk about how you're learning.
High learning was just wicked. I can't remember like how regular it was. I think maybe it was like every 2 weeks. I'm sure it was like more often than once a month. And you know, we just play there a lot. It was like a really good you know, just outlet for the scene, and you know, like kind of hub where you know, everyone kind of like, yeah, just kind of like developed, and it was just like a focal point really. And also like amazing like the acts that they get to headline, you know, so they always had like big acts headlining. I remember like Arrested Development, and even though I wasn't like, you know, mad fan of their music, they played like a legendary set, like, and I think they like left the club in their set, you know, in the middle of the set, and everyone kind of like followed, and you know, like went on the street, carried on like, you know, like rapping and stuff, and then came back in the club. It was something mad like that happened. Yeah, I think it was like lots of, yeah, I can't really remember offhand all the different acts, but there was some wicked people that played. And then we used to do like DJing for the open mic, so there was always like that open mic bit, and you know, that was really good for you know, all the developing MCs, and just giving people like a spot to yeah, just to develop and like grow as like musicians and vocalists and rappers and stuff like that.
It was the shared growth back then, wasn't it? We're talking about a time that encapsulated so much enthusiasm, love, and respect for what everybody was doing creatively. Do you have a favorite jam session from that period?
Well, actually, like we started doing this thing called Freestyle Fridays, and that was like at my parents' house, like when I was living there. Like I had like, you know, I had my bedroom, but I had like a little studio, like in, you know, like when the spare rooms I just turned into my studio, and it just like started happening. Like we'd like on Fridays, we'd just like invite some MCs round, and we'd just record a live jam session that was all freestyle. So all the rapping was freestyle, and you know, it was like Humorak and Rough Styles and Junior Disprol, and you know, that's how we sort of met all those guys. I mean, we've met them before, but that's how we kind of like started, you know, working with them, and you know, all kind of like hanging out. So and we just record it. That was like the kind of focus always, was just to record what we were doing. So yeah, so all these things are, yeah, they should be recorded somewhere. I think like somewhere like in like Rob's stuff. I think, I guess like his parents or maybe Nina's got it or something like that. But yeah, I think that, you know, all that stuff should be like archived somewhere.
Do you remember if any of those tapes manifested into their own projects in terms of ideas and demos in the future?
Well, I don't know, like we're on like our first like vinyl release, which was like a weird like little turntablist kind of you know, little turntablist album. We had a couple of freestyles on there, and that, you know, that was all kind of like inspired by Freestyle Friday. So we were very much into the whole idea of freestyles, you know, like properly just straight off the top of the head kind of thing, especially with rapping. And yeah, so on that record, there's a Junior Disprol track which is all freestyled, and there's a Rough Styles track which is all freestyled.
Amazing. Going back, because this, of course, is later on this album you're talking about, but going back in terms of freestyle versus what was planned, can you talk about this evolution with the group, which kind of changes after these or during these jam sessions you're talking about? You start incorporating a flute, trumpet, percussion, and keyboard in your shows. How does that come about? What's the evolution of that?
I don't know. Like, I think, well, because there was like always this kind of focus with like turntablism and battling. So, you know, all the stuff that which we would catch on like videos and stuff like that was all battle stuff. and we were never really into that kind of like competitive kind of side of things. I think like for me personally, I didn't like the idea of like getting up on stage and like, you know, doing a routine that's like supposed to be like, you know, showcasing all my, you know, it just made me nervous even to think about it, you know, to battle somebody. I didn't like the idea of like, you know, just performing in that kind of like with all that kind of focus just on myself, you know. So, you know, I've always been like kind of introverted in that way. So that whole battle thing just didn't like sit with me particularly well. And so that's why it was always more like, you know, making music and doing, you know, doing stuff for like music's sake rather than like outdoing somebody's sake kind of thing. So so, you know, adding like flute and keyboards and stuff like that just seemed to kind of like make sense. And you know, for me personally, maybe it felt like it took the focus off me a little bit as well. Right. So I kind of like that. And then we had all these other people doing stuff. And yeah, I think Rob probably felt the same. And you know, Ben and Paul, you know, even back then when we were doing more stuff with them, because by that point, I think Ben and Paul had moved to Bristol, and you know, it was just harder for us to like link up and do stuff. So we'd still do gigs together, but all like the practicing and working out, you know, musically working things out would be done, you know, me, Rob, and Mike, Rob's brother. So he was playing the flute and playing the keyboards, and then we just introduced, like what was his name? Itchy Fingers. This producer called Itchy Fingers, who was Pete, and he played the trumpet. So he got involved playing like the trumpet and stuff. And yeah, it was really cool. It was really like, you know, kind of quite progressive, I guess, and like, you know, kind of like ahead of its time, I suppose, thinking about it now.
It really was
just like adding all this, like mad sort of like analog synthy stuff, and you know, or like, you know, and Mike on the flute, you know, he'd never like really been taught to play the flute. He just kind of like started playing it, and so we just like improved as we were like, you know, working stuff out and working on routines and sets. I guess it was, you know, sets of songs and stuff like that. So yeah, we just kind of like developed it like that, and then we started playing in Greece a lot. So, you know, they really liked that in Greece, and so we just carried on and just kept doing it.
So it was like half turntablist, half instrumentalist vibes.
Yeah, just exactly that, really. Yeah, just doing like, you know, the same things we'd do with, you know, like a turntable routine, but just like adding, you know, flute and keyboards. And like Rob had this mad effects machine, like this like kind of shitty Zoom effects machine, which used to plug the input into the output, so it would feed back on itself, and it would just make this like mad spacey kind of like pitch shifting delay kind of sound. And so he would do that. So sometimes it would just be like me on the turntable scratching, and the rest would be, you know, live kind of music. And then sometimes it would just be me and Rob just doing scratch stuff. So it was quite, you know, it was always kind of like vary.
Hi, my name's DJ Parker, aka Pete, aka Neuropol. I'm from Bristol, but I spent good 4 years of my life immersed in the Cardiff hip hop scene when I was at university. My memories of Optimas Prime mainly center around the thought of like, oh shit, they're fucking brilliant. They're so much better than me. And how much seeing them kind of made me realize how much work I needed to do. Because they were, even in the early days, like I'm talking, I don't know how long they were going when I arrived, but late 90s, they were all already well above everyone else in terms of their scratching ability. They were, for me, they were going along the lines of like Cuba and the Invisible Scratch Pickles, because they were on that alien tip where it was like, I don't understand their rhythm. It was like not basic in any way. They were doing things that were strange but sounded amazing. And both Stagger and Monkey were a big inspiration for me, as well as just being massively intimidating. They were lovely people, and like is the case with most of these things, they had this incredible ability, and you expected them to have an ego with it, and they just were really quiet, quite shy and retiring type people that had no ego whatsoever. And that's another inspiration. That's good to have people like that around you. But I wouldn't say I battled them, because I wouldn't be that stupid to battle them, but I definitely scratched alongside them. There was scratch showcases at the Toucan where we all took turns scratching, and it was just, I guess for me it was embarrassing, because I just, I do my thing and then they would do their thing, and I just think, wow, like, you've just shat over everybody. You're amazing. What was really nice later in life, for me anyway, is that when I ended up making tunes and touring, well, this story specifically, I was touring Canada. I'd lost touch with Cardiff for years and years, and lost touch with all of those guys. But I was touring Canada, and I turned up in Calgary, and you arrived at the club and you look at the flyers, like who's been in the week before me or after me or whatever, like who's on the circuit, and I saw Stagger's name, and I was like, Jesus, man, that's so cool. Like, we were like kids scratching in Toucan, like 98, and this was like fast forward to 2010, and we're on this circuit doing our thing. He was doing dubstep then, I think, and I was doing something similar. So it was just a beautiful thing. It was, you're all the way miles away from home, but you get that reminder of your past, which was a beautiful thing.
Where did your curatorial practice as a turntablist start and end personally between the rest of the crew? And what do you think you did bring specifically to the tables?
What did I bring? I don't know. Maybe I had that, like, kind of like motivation to plan stuff. So maybe I brought that a bit more, just like, I want to make music. I want to have like songs and stuff that we can go back and be like, we're going to play this one, and we're going to play this one, rather than it always just be like turn up and just kind of like make it up on the spot. So I think, yeah, maybe I brought that to it a bit more, just that kind of musical kind of, just musical kind of structure. Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned Greece. What could you tell me about being out in Greece and doing shows and routines out there?
Yeah, it was wicked. They were like, we kind of got on board with this group over there that were signed to Warner Brothers at the time. So they were like really like had a lot of, financial backing. They had like lots going on. They had like big shows all the time, and they could afford to just fly us out. Like, so I think over like, like a year and a half or maybe like 2 years, we were, going back and forth to Greece, like, all the time, like every couple of months or even more often, and yeah, and it was just like they had like a massive following over there. So we were doing like really sort of big gigs, always really sort of well organized. And they were just like serious, like they were like proper, like we never like had that kind of, just kind of, never worked with people that was so sort of on it. They really sort of knew what they were doing, and right. Had like a kind of focus and stuff like that. And then just met loads of people out there, because they were like a group that had loads of different groups under their wing. So we were like, met all like their kind of like, acts that were all kind of coming up as well. And they had their own sounds as well. They really had like a style that was kind of like really sort of grounded in boom bap, but had this kind of like Greek kind of depth to it. You know, it was like that kind of almost like kind of morose kind of folky guitar sound that was kind of like all kind of like mixed with like, you know, really sort of like well produced boom bap kind of hip hop.
So it was right up your alley.
Yeah, like not always, it wasn't always like the stuff that I would, you know, really kind of dig, but often, sometimes, you know, there'd be certain things that were like really good. It was like really well put together music, but it was like they really didn't know about like, you know, ravey kind of stuff. And I think at the time I was just getting into like two-step and garage and stuff like that. So I remember playing some of that stuff out there before, and you know, that took a lot of people by surprise.
You end up traveling again after that through Community Music Wales and going to Cuba in Italy.
Yeah, I can't remember if that was like before the Greece thing. I think that was actually around about the same time, but I think we actually went to Cuba before we went to Greece. And then we went to Cuba twice, and that was just me and Rob, and that was more teaching through Community Music Wales, rather than being like, you know, like to play a show. But we did play shows out there as well. Thinking back on it, you know, I was pretty young at the time, so it was just mad being in Cuba in this, like, you know, it was really like just so different to the UK, especially then. And so I was just like quite sort of like overwhelmed by the experience, and just kind of like, you know, just being a kid and just like getting wrecked, and just, yeah. And it's like a really weird place because obviously there's like no advertising or anything there. So, you know, you don't really know what, like everything that was planned didn't go ahead the way it was supposed to. Like, you know, we were supposed to play one place, but we ended up playing somewhere completely different, and you know, nothing went according to plan. But that was like part of like the way things were over there. You
That's
know,
a
just
learning
ended
curve.
up, yeah, it just ended up this one night like in this like party somewhere, and then somebody's like, oh yeah, it's like Erykah Badu's playing in a bit.
Wow.
And we're like, what? Yeah, it was mad. And yeah, it was just really interesting. Like mad experience.
Going back but going forward, you talked about Void Fill earlier, which ends up, of course, becoming your first full length. What was the motivation behind that project specifically? This happens after Cuba, is that right?
I can't remember actually, but the motivation was that me and Rob had done a little like CD before that, and that was just like literally like, I don't know, like I think Rob turned up in my house one day and was just like, yeah, right, let's just make something. Let's just like make, you know, an album. And we're going to start it now. And we just started doing it, and then just did it. And it was like a little CD that we put together, and it was called The Dynamic Duo or something like that. And somebody must have it somewhere. Hopefully like Captain will get hold of it for the because it was cool. It was like you know, it was just like a precursor to Voidville basically. And we were like working, you know, as I mentioned, we were working for Community Music Wales, and they had a label that they were starting. So I think we just like, you know, gave it to like the boss there. He heard it and was like, oh, you know, we want you to do another one of those, and we're going to put it on record. So that was the motivation. You know, we just got asked to do it by Community Music Wales.
Dope. So the album grows organically out of that situation, and from that situation, you end up launching Dial Up Records in 2004. Was there a catalyst or person who pushed you to launch Dial Up as this hub to release beats and work with a lot of localized and UK talent back then?
Yeah, I think Rob, it was just like Rob's idea. He was always like the
he was the mastermind.
He was the mastermind, yeah. He was just like the person who would just come up with an idea and be like, let's do it, you know. And I'd always be like, you know, oh shit, I got loads of stuff on. It would just be like that. But yeah, we'd just do it, and you know, it was always worth doing, you know, and yeah, it was just good. He was just the motivator, I think.
And of course, it starts with Piramoya Anthem.
Yeah, Piramoya, and that was like a group that we met in Greece. So the Greeks, BD Foxmore and Yolanda, they were like the main dudes, you know, heading all the Greek stuff. And so they had a few people that they were kind of like linked with. So and one of them was this guy Winston Irie, who is General Levy's brother. Do you know? Like, really? Yeah, his brother. And wow. And so he would like play over there as well. So we like, you know, we'd go over there at the same time. So we all got pretty friendly. And his nephew was rapping with like a bunch of other mates of his, and like Foxmore had heard a tape of theirs and got those guys over. And so before that, they weren't even Piramoya. I think Foxmore gave him that name, and it's like Pira is like Greek for fire, and Moya, I can't remember what Moya is, but it was like, you know, fire strength or something. So it was like a combination of these words. So so we met them in Greece, and then they came, you know, came to Cardiff. Like they were all from, I don't know where they were from, like Hackney or something like that.
Was it Brixton?
Oh, Brixton. Yes, they were from Brixton. Well done. Yeah.
What can you tell me about Revenge of the Tramps, which was the B-side with Junior Disprol?
Yeah, well, we were just doing, I think we were doing stuff with Junior Disprol at that point.
Yeah.
And Rob knew Matt from college. They went to college together. So, you know, they knew each other from way back. And then we linked up when we were doing like the Freestyle Fridays. So,
right.
So that's how we started working with Junior Disprol. I always call him F because that's what Rob knew him as, and that's the name he used to go by before Junior Disprol.
HSG was the prototype back then for what Squid Ninjas would later become.
Yes.
What are your strongest memories from the concepts for Tech CP sessions?
I can't remember. Like, I think my strongest memory was just like, I had like a really kind of like shitty studio at my mate's house. I was living at my mate's house. He had like a coach house on you know, converted old coach house on you know, when the streets just like coming off like Wellfield Road or something.
Right.
And so like I had like this really like, you know, like half built bedroom with like a empty room in the back. So I just kind of like set up a studio, and you know, like back then I didn't know like anything about recording or like, you know, how to record or like what mics to use. You know, everything was just super rough and ready. And yeah, just being in this like really kind of unprofessional kind of studio with Heckler and Scammer and all that lot. I can't even remember what their names were at the time. I don't know if that was like their MC names, and Che as well. So Che, Meta Beats, and they just come around and recorded. And we met them actually because we were doing lots of workshops in Barry, and they just turned up at the workshop one time. And I think I'd met Che like, you know, quite a few years before that as well, like a jam in Barry. So yeah, so we just met him like that.
Was that Area 41?
No, it was kind of before. Oh, I don't know actually. Maybe it was Area 41, but it wasn't in Area 41.
Right.
It was like in one of the parks, like Gibby Park or, you know, Gibbonsdown, or maybe what, like this would happen a lot with me and Rob. We would like get like booked to just turn up in a park with turntables and try and encourage people, try and encourage like the kids that were like, maybe like causing some kind of mischief in the area to just get on the decks and, some kind of like positive focus for their energy or something like that. So that would happen a lot. And we were just at one of those parks one day, and I think Heckler turned up, and then I think he phoned Che. I can't remember, but those, we met a bunch of them there, and then just started doing stuff with them.
My name's Junior Disprol from Dead Residents and Flea Pit, and currently doing the old solo thing.
Yeah, this is Joe Blow from Squid Ninja, Veteran Records and Decorated Veterans.
So we're talking about Nuff Deep and Apocalyptic, 2 tracks that we were both involved with back in the old HSG days of Squid Ninja. I'll go for Nuff Deep. I'll tell you about. I remember we started doing that. I was Stag had this beat, and we were over there, over his place in Grangetown, like working on that. And he pulled that beat out. He always had like, a beat folder on the go. And really liked it. It was like, I can't remember what the BPM of it was, but it was like, you go double time on it or whatever. Like, it was just, something different for me anyway, at least anyway. And I remember, so that was originally going to be a Dead Resident track, I think. And then I think I put my verse down on it, and I think I went away on holiday. By the time I came back, I think it was, Scammer jumped on as well, and it was going on the HSG EP then.
Did you lay your verse down first? I'm sure you did, didn't you?
Yeah.
Your verse is already on it, because I'm sure. Yeah. I can remember Stag playing me the beat, man, and I was like, "What the fuck is this, man?" Do you know what I mean? And like, I'd be talking to him because I think that was one of the first tracks me and you made, didn't it? Definitely.
Yeah.
Because I remember saying, I need to get on a track with Junior Disprol, man, make it happen. And he was like, yeah, well, he's on the label. And I was like, yes, let's just do it, man. Do you know what I mean?
I'm sure we did Apocalyptic before that, man.
Was it? Yeah, I'm sure, man.
But I remember we did
actually, you're probably right. You are probably right, because I'm sure we recorded Apocalyptic in a different venue, wasn't it? In a different place.
Yeah, I think it was Monkeys. Actually, I think we might have recorded it at Monkeys.
Yeah, I think it was, man. I think it was.
It's all a blur, anyway, because there was always, and if you're playing one beat and somebody's on it, you go, is there room for me on that? Like, it was those days.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, man.
So yeah, that was a good one. That. So yeah, what do you remember about that? Did you about Nuff Deep? Were you recording? Did you record it down Grangetown, or did you record it in Barry?
I'm sure I was in Grangetown, wasn't it? Definitely, man. Yeah, I'm sure I think I definitely went with Scammer. Both of us went together and put our verses down together, I think, like, because I was telling him about the beat. I was like, yo, you gotta check this beat out, man. Fucking, he passed me a CD, like, and he had loads of what beats he was currently making, and I wanted them all, man.
You know what I mean? That was always the way, man. There's tons of it like that. And it could have been any time, if you've gone down there, whoever's getting down there first for a session, is
first come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But good old days, all that.
Yeah.
And then, so what do you remember about Apocalypse again?
I remember Fordy, man, right when he was writing his verse, and he was coming out with that Walla Holla Balloon and all that stuff, like, do you know what I mean? And I was just loving the vibe. He vibed me up for that track.
Yeah, he got a wicked verse on that as well, like,
Yeah, I mean, he come with the goods.
Yeah, that's one of my favourite tracks from that era as well, definitely.
Yeah,
the three of us on there. The beat, I remember Stag played me that beat, and I remember it was Down Monkeys that we were recording then, like, for that one. So I remember that. Yeah, it was just, I think, like I say, I think that was the first one. I think the first one we recorded definitely together.
Yeah, I can remember around about that sort of time. I was like looking to get something released, like, I think we'd just done Shell Shock, so like I was pretty new to dial-up, like, and the actually putting things out. Like that was pretty much the start of like actually releasing anything, was through Stag Like a Monkey. You know, I hadn't put anything out before that, like, you know, officially on wax or anything like that, you know. So like that was a new thing for me. Like I was a new experience, and the start of it really, for like, you know, going from like being a bedroom MC to actually having something tangible in your hand you're actually putting out, like, you know.
When you look back on that era, do you have a favorite collaboration?
Yeah, maybe Knobs to Nuts. I'd made a tune with Knobs to Nuts, and I just thought, I just like really liked him, and I loved his like you know, just like the hip hopness about him. So I just really liked that, and we made a tune. I don't know what happened to it, but like I sampled Kraftwerk, like a proper like fast electro Kraftwerk tune, and he like wrote a rap all about Venus, and that was just right up my street. And
amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that was like my favorite, but that definitely sticks in my mind.
Speaking of standout originals, what was it like sharing a living and creative space with Rough Stars and Black Tricks around that time?
Yeah, mad. I ended up living with Rough Stars for a long time, and it was just really interesting. Like, he's really like an amazing, unique person, and so like inspirationally wise, it was really good. And you know, like Black Tricks as well. You know, he had always like a real keen ear for good hip hop and stuff like that. And so, you know, he put me on to like a lot of good music. And Rough Stars as well. Obviously, like Rough Stars has just been like on it hip hop wise for like, you know, forever. So he's just had loads of wicked music. And then
he's
we,
also
you
a
know,
DJ himself.
Yeah, he's a wicked DJ, like really good, and just like you know, just not sort of like not sort of stuck in any kind of like genre or anything like that. You know, he just like play all kind. You know, I know he's like we always like used to take the piss bit. But he was like, you know, mad into Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson and shit like that. But yeah, it was just always interesting, and you know, it's funny because it's like sometimes you think, you know, certain key moments when you'd like get kind of exposed to a song or like an artist or something, and you know, if that hadn't happened, how would that have like changed your life, you know? And you know, I'm sure like some of like, you know, living with those two was definitely something that like, you know, just like got me into different things and got me thinking about music in a different way.
What do you think is the legacy of that era and what you guys were doing to preserve the culture?
Well, there were definitely a lot of Optimas Prime tags around Cardiff that
it was
lasted for a long time, which people, you know, like always used to mention and stuff.
Those stickers as well. Let's not forget the stickers.
Yeah, the stickers. Yeah.
They traveled.
Yeah, exactly. And we got into a lot of trouble for a lot of that, because a lot of that we were doing workshops, you know, with kids in like Canton and stuff, and we just gave them like a roll of. It was just tape. It was like a roll of Optimas Prime sellotape that we got made, and then the next day we just like driving through town, and it was just stuck up everywhere. So it wasn't even us. In fact, none of the like tags or anything were actually us. Like the first load of tags were from like this lecturer friend of ours who's like a lecturer in Cardiff Uni, and he was just like a mad fan of ours. And one night he just took it upon himself to go out and, you know, it was like when Banksy was like first about, and he just found out about like stenciling. So he just went out and like stenciled like everywhere in Cardiff. It just happened a couple of times. We just like, all of a sudden there was just like our name like plastered everywhere. And some, you know, it was just like, you know, totally out of our control, but like really good at the same time. You know, it's like you can't like pay for that kind of shit. But yeah, legacy, actually, you know, thinking about a legacy is definitely with the teaching, and you know, he wasn't even like teaching a lot of the time. He was just turning up with turntables and just like just inspiring people, I guess. And and then those people that we inspired us as well. So it's just like a lot of the young people at the time that we were doing workshops with, and I think I mentioned before, like ended up being people that we make music with and hang out with and stuff like that. And so maybe the legacy is like that in like the that sort of slightly younger generation.
So this is Daedelus from Los Angeles, California, and thinking about the way that the music was set off, the way it was presented, the way it reached me. There's something about beat makers who are proud of their creations, and when they're sharing them with you, there is a certain sly smile about like, oh, I'm going to get you with this one kind of thing. And Optimas Prime as a unit, as an idea, specifically Monkey, I think in this case, was underspoken, but there was an enthusiasm with the delivery. Right? It was kind of like a monumental swing, and when it connected, when the bass dropped, it was kind of would shake you a bit, and it was easy to catch the vibe. Basically, it was easy to kind of get on board what they were doing because of the way that they would hand it to you so easily. Thinking about Stagga in that regard would make music that I think other people would listen to and be like, this is undJable. This slithers around too much. It kind of slides and slacks in weird ways. But of course, the underlying beat of it, the kind of way it pulsed, if you have just even the teeny bit of knowledge, it's really easy actually, because it's just a really low fundamental to all of it. And there was a lot of grime going on in my ears at that time. And this was like a breath of fresh air in opposition, because as much as they had their hyphy moments, they're like high energy bits. There was something about it that was very blunted, very smoked out, and it made all the sense with LA. And I loved it. And I couldn't help but want to share that same enthusiasm and energy as it was handed to me. I only rocked, I think, with Monkey a handful of times on stages. So it made a big difference in my interpretation of the sound, of how the location had such a play in it. It wasn't just their own like kind of wildness, but it was also, there's something really special about seeing a DJ, seeing the beat maker as DJ, as purveyor of their sound space. I definitely understood better being in that presence.
I was always like, I found it a real pain recording MCs. I never really kind of like enjoyed the process. I mean, obviously at times it was like good fun and like hanging out with people and stuff, but I just found it kind of like stressful, like recording like loads and loads of takes and like trying to listen back and think which is the best one. And a lot of the time, MCs, I found them kind of like quite fickle and stuff like that, like with what kind of music, what kind of beats they liked. And I really liked it if I think with Rough Styles, like sometimes he would just like record something one take and it would just be bam, yeah, that's fine, and then like do his backups and then it's bam, it's done. But other MCs who would just be like, I'm just gonna say that line and then drop me in by there, and then I'll stop and then like drop me in by there, and then I'm gonna do all my backups, and then you'd have like like 6, 7, 10 tracks of backups, and yeah, it was just like a process that I found kind of tedious a lot of the time. So getting into just production and just making instrumental music was like real kind of like liberating for me.
So it's kind of a response to those challenges you're talking about. Was there any challenges in the beginning navigating this new sound you're exploring?
Yeah, just trying to kind of get an idea out of my head onto the computer, and not really knowing much about like production techniques and synthesis, and like now it's like I know how to like like compress things, and like gain staging, and like just little things like that which I never knew anything about back then. And it was all just kind of like intuition, and sometimes it work and sometimes it wouldn't work. But yeah, it's just kind of like finding your feet, really. But it's still like that, I feel like it's always kind of going to be like that.
What were you using as far as tech back then?
Well, so originally I was just using Cubase and sometimes Reason, and then I got into using Reason more. But I would like use Reason like through Cubase. I can't remember what the like little kind of like program was that linked the two. But yeah, so you could open Reason and like use it through Cubase. So that's what I used to use.
Got it. And of course, as you're doing this, you're experimenting more, and your music starts to evolve and mutate. You're now producing under a new name, Elmono.
Yeah, that came a bit later when I think I don't know. I think like 2010, 2011, something like that. When I kind of stopped making, dubstep kind of, kind of like, had its kind of course where it was kind of like good. And then it kind of like started going kind of like, that real sort of like generic dubstep sound.
Right.
Just got kind of like really kind of like saturated. And then I just started making, like stuff which was more like kind of like techy, kind of like electro, maybe like techno-y kind of, even like housey sometimes. And just got into like, all that other kind of music. That dubstep kind of like split into like two categories, and it just went off like on a more kind of like post dubstep kind of sound. I think they started calling it like post dubstep or whatever. So I kind of got more into that, and then so my sound, and also actually there was another artist called Monkey about. And I just thought, oh, it's like a good time just to change my name. So I just changed to Elmono, which means monkey in Spanish.
This notion of you as sort of a iconoclast, this sense of, always striking out, sort of attacking new concepts, and as we say, pushing the edges of the envelope. Where does that come from?
Yeah, I guess like just kind of like my kind of upbringing on the music that I would listen to. So I was always just into like experimental stuff. Like when I was listening to like, like sort of old 60s, psychedelic rock and stuff like that. I just like those songs which were like, like 10 minutes long, or like, those weird sort of spaced out songs. I was never really kind of like into the kind of songy kind of verse chorusy stuff. I like the ones that went off on weird tangents. So I just felt like I always wanted to make that kind of music. And then I never really felt that I wanted to make stuff that was going to be kind of, big in a commercial sense, I never really felt that.
What was it about that period that worked for you as a fan creating as Elmono? What was it that was inspiring you back then about the Welsh beat scene and culture?
They like with the dubstep thing, we really got a kind of another like community. It was almost like that those hip hop days, but like a new kind of like lease of it. It was like a new generation that we were doing stuff with. It kind of did feel like that whole hip hop thing was kind of like behind us, and just kind of like onto something new. So so we were like like hanging out with like sort of different producers and DJs, and playing at Neuropol. So Neuropol was like the night that we were all sort of like playing out every week and stuff. So everyone's like had new music, everyone's like producing music themselves as well. So like, you know, Little Si would play a set and he'd just have all these tunes that he had made, and you know, Rob would play and have all his tunes, and I'd have all my new tunes. So it's like a real, you know, that kind of like mixing pot of like all our styles, and everyone had their own sound. And you know, Jamal from Dark House Family, you know, he was like really into making all this kind of like weird hip hop and stuff, even though he'd be making like jungle and stuff before. You know, I think Jamal and my mate Reese, who is Kid Robot was like his name at the time, you know, they would put me onto like Flying Lotus and all that kind of LA, you know, Sam I Am and all that kind of stuff. So there was all that stuff like kind of inspiring me and inspiring everyone. And, you know, I was like, I would like play all that kind of stuff in my dubstep sets as well. So it's just kind of like, you know, anything would go for me. You know, if I liked it, I'd just play it.
This is Daedelus. I'm from Los Angeles, California. I want to speak to you a bit about the beats and the instrumentals and the music. I think when I first came over, it was for Bach, and small room, and I didn't know what to expect. A lot of indie rock and otherwise had been sold to me from that scene, and Super Furry Animals and otherwise have been really kind, encountering some of that sound and some of those members. But I didn't understand that there was so much of the beats happening. There was so much awareness of Madlib and others of my contemporaries, Flying Lotus, that I had worked with and enjoyed, and that even that some of my sounds would have resonated so far. And I think at first it was Dark House Family. I'm pretty sure they were the most on the wavelength. Even some of the music had been played not just in London, but all the way on our shores, been sent over. DJs were always on the hunt for the new hot thing. It was always intrinsic to the genre to want that next thing to kind of blow your wig. And Dark House had some tracks like that. So there was some vague awareness, but then to meet the crew in their city was so transformative. And I believe we even sessioned up for a second. I believe I even got a chance to sit in the lab and hear some of the raw right off the tapes, so to speak. And they had started to talk up more depth of the scene, right? It wasn't just about them and those kind of like the warm boom bap kind of sounds. There was also this like futuristic, really pushing kind of things that were happening. And really quickly enough, that was indeed Monkey and Stagga. Stagga was a gem of it, though. It was like the kind of thing that I brought back to LA, like Plunder, like those sounds. Especially there was this period in like the mid-aughts or the late aughts, I guess. But those beats I could play on a big system at like Low End Theory, and people would to a T come up and be like, what is this? I need this. And I would point them in the direction of this very mild-mannered producer who was wrapped in mystery because it was so far away. And it was a MySpace era. It was the SoundCloud era, the early parts of the SoundCloud era. And, you know, you could do with a single few tracks, you could really have an outsized shadow cast. And some of that sound, that thing that was a precursor to modern dubstep, so it had an aggression to it, but it also had a lot of slyness to it. It kind of like slithered around. And that was Stagga's specialty, and Monkey as well, but like, and it was hard to kind of separate all the things, right? Like everything kind of comes out in a tumble because that's what it sits in my memory space. But still to this day, I'll rinse out like Time Warp, Stagga track, and every single time. Maybe it's because jungle's getting a second look and people are thinking rhythm, not just dubstep, and the kind of, you know, the color-based sound, and it's just Stagga was on all of that. Stagga's did that well before it kind of went much less overground, even underground. And, you know, we're left with a big hole in his lack. I know there was more there. Listening back to some of the demos that I had received, some of those brief encounters I had, just kind of eating ridiculous food and talking ridiculous music, it feels of a bygone era, and I miss it deeply. But I can sit with the music and be right back there, and I'm grateful for that.
When you look at your contributions so far, what strikes you the most?
I think because people tell me just the influence that myself and Rob had on people in like workshops, and not even workshops, but just like just like doing like CMW stuff and getting involved with the younger community. I know it's kind of like a kind of cliche in that it's kind of, teaching the kids and stuff like that, but it's definitely that, like sometimes like, I don't know how true this is because it's probably not that true, but like, in actual fact, but sometimes like for instance, Ransom, another DJ from Cardiff, was saying the other day that if it weren't for me and Rob, he wouldn't be DJing, which I was just like really sort of taken back by that. And I was just like, yeah, of course you would be DJing, it's like in you, you would have been doing it anyway. But it's good to know that we played a part in just kind of inspiring people and giving people confidence to do something,